Hello and welcome back to the Anything Liverpool YouTube channel, or if you're watching on Twitter as well. Today, joined by a very special guest, Ben. How you doing today, mate?
Everything is good. Crazy window, but I think from Liverpool's point of view, a very positive one.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like things are breaking left and right, even kind of while we're waiting. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but we've got Will Wright who's just joined, Tyler Morton is
Yeah.
breaking in, so there's definitely a lot to talk about. I mean, we'll kick it off with kind of some of the more recent stuff. Will Wright, I kind of what news was breaking last week was that Arsenal had beaten Liverpool to the punch,
Mm.
and that it was kind of it almost looked like he was done to Arsenal. Obviously, a very exciting 17-year-old from Salford who's risen through the ranks. Quickly, just to start off, what can you kind of obviously tell us about that? And with Arsenal, did he only want Liverpool, or was it more the project?
Yeah, I think it was Liverpool project, and it was slightly premature to refer to it as a done deal with Arsenal. What happened was they became front runners briefly because they bid higher and they agreed a fee with Salford before Liverpool did, and that lended itself towards this narrative that Arsenal were in the box seat. But it was never a done deal with Arsenal because they had to agree terms with the player as well, and they didn't. And Liverpool stuck to their position, which was 200,000 fixed fee, and from there it was just a case of working with the player to understand whether or not he changed his mind or was still sold on the Liverpool project. And this is where, when you work with players and family and pathways for a long time, you get a lot of buy-in sometimes from young players, regardless of the finances of the deal. So the reality is that Arsenal were very aggressive. They came in late. They offered a higher fee to both Salford and also package to the player as well, but he stuck with his original decision, which was that he wanted to join Liverpool. And this was largely down to Liverpool's head of academy recruitment, Chris Dowling, who my understanding is was influential in pulling the Will Wright deal off. Contract until 2028, medical done, good young signing coming in with the club, who Liverpool obviously believe has got a huge future ahead. And in the end, they've been able to beat off that competition from Arsenal. But we shouldn't really bill this as Liverpool hijacked today from an Arsenal deal. I think it's easy to paint it that way if you bought into the narrative of Arsenal done deal, but it was kind of the other way around. It was nearly a Liverpool done deal. It was then an Arsenal hijack that for a brief period of time looked like it might be successful, and then in the end the player sticking to his original decision, which was that he only wanted Liverpool.
Yeah, it sounds a lot similar to the Rio Ngumoha kind of saga where Chelsea offered Rio a significant package to sign, and kind of he ended up choosing the Liverpool scholarship. And I don't know if you kind of he's impressed. There's a lot in pre-season. He was very good against AC Milan. There's been talks about potentially a new contract. Obviously, he's still, I think we forget, he's 16 years old, but not just on Engamo, but Liverpool really seem to be focusing on the academy, don't they? It seems like a real project that they're hoping to maybe rival the likes of Chelsea with going forward.
Yeah, kind of. I don't think the Liverpool notion of academy is quite the same as Chelsea, because Chelsea overstock in age groups, knowing that they can loan them out in a multi-club, or in addition, the value raises. And then if they break into the first team, fine. But remember, there's more of a grey area in the Chelsea project because first teamers are being brought in that are not too far off academy age. And that's significant because if you're signing 17, 18, 19-year-olds and they're straight in the first team, your 14, 15, 16-year-olds realize that they almost might be part of a bit of a lost generation, because when players work, you then want to kind of stagger their eventual replacements by about 4 or 5 years, to the point where your 17 and 18-year-olds, if they're getting opportunities, are not looking over their shoulder and being like, in a year's time, there's going to be a whole new wave of 17, 18-year-olds. Clubs that choose to do it that way and not stagger the age groups as much in terms of who they think can go all the way through to the first team tend to be more aggressive selling clubs. And Chelsea's perspective is very much to perhaps have more players in terms of volume and believe that they can all raise in value. I think Liverpool are a bit more focused around pathways. So, of course, an academy still has exactly the same scenario of there are 18, 17, 16, 15-year-olds. It's not like there's a whole gap. But if you add up the volume at Chelsea's academy and the volume at Liverpool's, there'll definitely be slightly less players. And then naturally, you know, within academy that statistically a lot of them just don't make it. And where Liverpool are very good is in working out the pathways for the ones that they think will, and protecting them and making sure that they don't have to be thrown in at the deep end immediately. And then the ones that don't, they still do turn a profit. And in addition, they work very hard for kind of life after football, or life through the lower leagues, or life at the next club, offering that exit from Liverpool support, which is a very underrated skill. Because actually, if you're joining Liverpool on day one in the academy and you know that make it or don't make it, this club is going to look after you, that's part of the pathways as well. But with Rio, only 16, outstanding, could potentially play in the Luis Diaz role. So is that going to form any part of their thinking in the next sort of year or two in terms of whether they go for a young left winger now, a replacement for Diaz, or just put all of their efforts onto Alexander Isak, that I'm sure we'll talk about later in the show? Outstanding player, highly rated, several top European and English clubs were looking at him. So a coup that Liverpool have been able to sign him. And he reminds me in many ways of the sort of hype we're getting at Arsenal with Max Dowman. This is a player that very quickly could become very spoken about and given significant minutes, maybe within the next 2 seasons at Liverpool Football Club. So keep an eye on him. Pre-season is not always a gauge of where a player will be and what their next pathway will be either. But I think Liverpool hold high hopes for Rio's development as somebody that could be a very serious Liverpool player in the future.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking on that left wing, Liverpool obviously have sold Luis Diaz for 75 million euros to Bayern Munich. The medical was today, I believe. What do you think the odds are? There's obviously been names surrounding kind of direct replacements. Rodrygo's been one. I know you've previously mentioned him being linked with Arsenal. Malik Fofana as well, who I believe Everton have just had Everton have interest in. There seems to be a lot of names that are being linked. Do you think it potentially Liverpool could go in for the likes of either a Fofana, who's obviously on the younger side, 20 years old, or maybe are the rumours that Rodrygo could be a potential? We know they've been following him for a very long time, so there is interest there from previous years, isn't there?
Yeah, with Rodrygo, I get the impression it's too expensive a deal. And obviously, if Liverpool are to move to Alexander Isak, it's tough to think that they'll do Rodrygo and Isak, not because they couldn't afford both, but you're getting a high wage, high agent fees. So Liverpool are not so much about the finances because they've got PSR headroom and their net spend is very low since 2020, 2021. They're not even in the top 5 in the Premier Leagues. They've kind of stockpiled the funds to have this kind of window. But naturally, they're still looking for value for money. So unless something gives significantly in the Rodrygo deal, should he choose to leave Real, and it's still an if, I'm not so sure that Liverpool are going to pursue that. The appreciation is there, same for Arsenal and several other clubs, but I'm not really led to believe at this stage it's a deal that they're really working on. And before anyone can decide on Rodrygo, he needs to have a meeting with Xabi Alonso, which I'm told hasn't happened yet, but is likely to take place this weekend. Then Real will understand whether Rodrygo wants to stay or go. And then at that point, if he's available on the market, we'll find out if this price is still 90 million euros, which I was led to believe it was at the beginning of the window, or if it's going to drop. And that will help inform what kind of suitors might come to the table. But I get it relatively downplayed by Liverpool sources. Of course, they like the player, same as Arsenal, like I say, but I'm not aware that they're really moving on it or have any plans to. This whole sort of narrative of Liverpool are in talks, Liverpool are pushing, Liverpool are front runners. I think that's very agent driven or intermediary driven, because what's happening at the moment is there's more than one intermediary and agent that's got a non-exclusive right to represent Rodrygo in different regions and with different clubs. And I think there's almost a fight at the moment for, if he leaves, which kind of intermediary or super agent might actually get the deal to negotiate it. And that's why I think the opportunity of Rodrygo is being brought to clubs rather than the other way around. So I'm quite cautious on the Rodrygo situation because I'm just not aware of Liverpool having any meaningful talks at this point, despite the fact that, yes, like many other clubs, they appreciate him. But I'm not led to believe they're acting on that appreciation at this stage. Malik Fofana's been on the list, so can't be ruled out. As you rightly say, it was Everton that made a bid. It got rejected. I think the player is looking to play European or Champions League football. So if he joins Everton, it will be a U-turn on that position. It's not done yet. And I know some people have spoken to me about how Lyon are interested in Tyler Morton. Is there any possibility of discussing the Malik Fofana deal at the same time? Not impossible. But I think the reality is that this is the one headache in some ways of Liverpool's window that was not planned for. So everything else that they've done to date has very much been decided before the window. Even a potential bid for Alexander Isak was in their mind, along with Hugo Ekitike, before the window opened. So was Florian Wirtz. They just had to wait and see whether he wanted to leave Germany. Frimpong was a release clause. Mamardashvili was pre-agreed. And Milos Kerkez was always on their radar. We know Richard Hughes knew him very well from his days at Bournemouth. So every move that Liverpool have made, even if the timing wasn't entirely in their control, was there before the window opened. But Luis Diaz was not for sale when the window opened. And I got the impression that that stance at that stage was quite genuine. And it only really changed when Diaz started really pushing. And then you can't keep an unhappy player 9 times out of 10. So now they have to decide, okay, because he's left and we wanted him for at least one more season, do we bring in another young left winger? Do we work out how we can fill that void within the playing group we've already got? Do we persist with Alexander Isak and then utilize Hugo Ekitike more in wide areas? And that's why I think senior recruitment staff came out to this tour of Asia to have these meetings. So now, after a little bit of a lull and following the Diaz exit, when Richard Hughes gets going again on the ground back in the UK, he's got a clear idea on budget, he's got a clear idea on targets, and he's got a clear idea on what they're going to do next. And in an ideal world, I think they'll put their time, energy, efforts, and budget on Alexander Isak and maybe go down a younger route for a left winger if they had 2 attackers. And that feels like where they're at, rather than not going for Isak, going for Rodrygo, or going for Isak and Rodrygo together, which I think is unlikely.
Yeah, I think one position as well that's very interesting is the centre backs. Liverpool have kind of got a lack there at the moment. Obviously, Joe Gomez and Ibrahima Konate are both injury prone. They lost Jarell Kwanzaa for 35 million to Bayer Leverkusen. We've obviously been heavily linked with MARC GUEHI. I know you tweeted earlier in the window that that Crystal Palace's stance is 50 million. And that Liverpool don't want to play ball at that price. Is it potentially something that could be done similar with Van Dijk, where, you know, we wait until January, force their hand, or do Liverpool want a senior centre-back this summer? Because we obviously were linked with Hato as well, previously a younger centre-back. So I feel like we could do with 2 centre-backs, but MARC GUEHI seems to be one of the more popular names.
Yeah, I think MARC GUEHI is not beyond the realms of possibility, but unlike suggestions a few weeks ago that they were definitively bidding, it depends on price, and you may not get the price you're looking for until later in the window. So I was always under the impression this centre-back would only really get going in either late July or early August, so we may have to still be a little bit patient. GUEHI's there and on the list. If the price drops below, say, 45 million, maybe even closer to 40 million, Liverpool may engage. But if Crystal Palace stick to this sort of 45, 50 million valuation, then Liverpool will look elsewhere. And GUEHI's kind of the exception to the rule, even though he's still young. So Richard Hughes had been shortlisting names when the window was opening in the age bracket of 18 to 22, because the feeling from Liverpool was if they could find someone young, they could ease them in. And that's consistent with the approach to Lenny Yoro, even though he joined Manchester United, the interest in Levi Colwell. All of these centre-backs, whether they're right-sided or left-sided, fall into the same age bracket, young and can be eased in. And that's the Liverpool way, because they didn't want to lose Trent Alexander-Arnold, but they still knew that Jeremy Frimpong was on their list. They've kept Andy Robertson at the club, but Milos Kerkez has arrived. Alisson's the number 1 goalkeeper for now, and yet Mamardashvili is there. So it's the same logic. If you can find a defender for the now and for the future, the pathway can allow you to not have them be the immediate starter or have the pressure of a price tag because maybe you've still got an older and established player. And Liverpool love that transition where they're replacing before they need to replace. And that's still the scenario, which is why these younger kind of centre-backs are all being shortlisted. But the situation is influenced by the fact if you want Guehi, he needs to be playing regularly because it's a World Cup year. And similarly, there's more urgency perhaps because they've been looking at these names whilst for a long period not knowing if Van Dijk was going to extend. And now they're in the same position with Ibrahima Konate. So there is a bit of urgency about maybe finding somebody that could play imminently, immediately, is Premier League ready. And that's maybe why they've pivoted towards Guehi, knowing if they can convince him of game time at Liverpool and at the right price, there's a situation where you're suddenly quite well stocked as far as centre-back pairings and partnerships and rotations are concerned, assuming that Ibrahima Konate stays, extends, or Liverpool are prepared, as they did with Van Dijk, to take that gamble and see whether or not he'll extend during the season, knowing that other clubs can come in and maybe reach a pre-agreement with him. So this is going through Liverpool's thinking at the moment. And added to that complication is, even though Palace would sell at the right price because they don't want to lose him on a free, Gay is quite prepared just to run down his contract and ultimately pick his new club after the World Cup next summer. So there's a lot of moving parts here. And this is why Liverpool haven't bid for now, but they might. Then if they don't go down that route, they'll be looking for Jarrell Quantz's age, 22 or younger. And that's where their initial interest in Jorel Hatto came from. He looks like he's on his way to Chelsea. Charlie Cresswell at Toulouse, the ex-Leeds defender, is another name that they've considered as well. So we'll have to wait and see if they hold out for Guehi, thinking the price will drop in the next 2-3 weeks. And I think there's a realistic chance of that. Or alternatively, if they go back to plan A, which was always to find a slightly younger defender, it's only marginal because I think Gay's 23, but they'd capped it at 22. And they may even go as low as 18 or 19. And that's what they're deciding at the moment. Do they go young for the future, gamble on the Van Dijk-Konate partnership, even with Quansah departing, or do they bring in someone established? And I think that's maybe what they're leaning towards, but it's dependent on two things. First of all, Palace's price dropping. And second of all, Gay actually being prepared to come in if Konate and Van Dijk are both at the football club, because he wants to play every single week and he can get that at Crystal Palace, regardless of the fact that Palace would rather sell him now because there's no chance of him signing a new deal.
Yeah, I think we'll move on to the big one, Alexander Isak. He's the talking point across the whole country, basically. I think, again, as I'm sure we're all aware with Twitter, rumours start flying. Everyone, starts saying stuff. I believe I saw a rumour on when I was listening to TalkSport on the way home that Alexander Isak's house went up for rent and and then got taken off. It's a bit everywhere at the moment. The report seemed to be that Liverpool are waiting to put a bid in. That bid has been quoted from around 120, 130 million pound, and it seems like to me it's very dependent. Look, I'm coming in it from a fan point of view as well. I'm very optimistic that this transfer happens, but from covering kind of news for a long time on Liverpool, for me, this seems like Liverpool are just waiting for Newcastle to get their signing done, and that Isak's kind of he's decided what his future is. Is that fair to say, or is there more kind of cards at play here?
I mean, if it comes off, it will be one of the most complicated and audacious swoops in many ways, especially because it will be coupled with Hugo Ekitike's arrival. So this isn't a step 1, step 2, step 3 quick deal. We may see it snowball, which will show you the direction of travel. But there's two completely different extremes at play here. One is Newcastle, who are braced for a Liverpool bid. They're anticipating one. They're somewhat fearful of one. Then at the same time, you have extreme caution on the Liverpool side. And Liverpool's perspective, speaking to sources, is very clear. They won't bid without encouragement. So if a bid goes in, accepted or rejected, it's a clear indication, even if it's turned away, even if it's still not for sale. If a formal bid goes in, it's a clear indication that Liverpool are confident that come the end of the window, Alexander Isak will be a Liverpool player. And that's the kind of simple way of looking at it. If they place a formal bid, it won't be blind. They've already been to Newcastle. They've already indicated they'll break the British transfer record. And therefore, if they actually place a formal bid, I don't think it will be without intel on not just the player side, but the club side, that there's a deal there to be had. And if they don't place a bid, then it's because they've got great market intel to realize that actually, after all of this, they're wasting their time. And sometimes when players don't want to train, are left out of tours, it can be because they're frustrated by their own club's position too. Because if Newcastle were willing sellers as of now, then Alexander Isak would probably be smiling on their pre-season tour, knowing that there would be a way of him getting out. So you have the internal friction, the tension, the politics, the Isak role, Newcastle needing to find probably replacements, plural, and then at the same time, Liverpool still being able to do a deal on their terms at value. And if that deal is 120, 130, of course, Liverpool will see value in it. But if that deal is 150, 170, there's a financial complication, not again because Liverpool don't have the PSR headway, but they're not the kind of club just to add 10, 20, 30, 40 million onto their own valuation of a player. They'll walk away. They'll know that Isak won't sign a new deal in likelihood, and they'll come back in January or next summer and they'll get it on their terms again. So this has kind of got Florian vibes to it, in the sense that in the early part of the Wright saga, Liverpool sources were very much like caution, distance, wait for encouragement from the player side, understand whether this is a 150 million euros deal or less. And actually, when you look back at that saga in the space of 2-3 weeks, the Wirtz buy-in came and the price was significantly below 150 million euros. So I think they'll be following the same path, realizing that from start to finish of Wirtz, once the player decided he wanted Liverpool, I think it still took 2 or 3 weeks. And therefore, if they're starting this process to explore Isak now, we might have to be a little bit patient with it. But once again, I come back to what I said before. If Liverpool bid, it won't be blind, in my opinion. Sources say if they bid, it will be with confidence. Otherwise, they won't bid at all. And that's where we're at. Suggestions the bid is going to go in a day, 2 days, I wouldn't get caught up in, because we have to wait and take it step by step. I'm not aware as of today of any formal talks between Newcastle and Liverpool in the last few days. And I'm not aware of any formal talks between Isak and Liverpool in the last few days. And part of that is because they've already approached Newcastle and they know that terms won't be a problem with Isak. So this is not about can you agree it with Isak. It's about can you agree it with Newcastle United. And when can you agree it with Newcastle United? You can agree it with Newcastle United when they line up their replacements, and you can agree it with Newcastle United when it becomes untenable with Isak. They won't want to come back from this tour and have to face questions about him every week. They won't want to have to come back and explain why he's maybe not in group training. They won't want to have to name a matchday squad for the first Premier League game of the season and explain why he's not in it. They won't want to go through 2-3 games where maybe a replacement's come in, the window's still open, and the Premier League season is ongoing. And they still have to explain why he's out of the squad as well. So, of course, if you add it all up, it's quite positive for Liverpool. But I think fans are optimistic, Newcastle are fearful, and Liverpool are cautious. And once again, they won't place that formal bid for Isak, however anticipated it may be, until they get encouragement. So with other transfers, when you place the bid, it becomes a talking point. And sometimes you get the player and sometimes you don't. And sometimes you're hijacked. But there's definitely no definitiveness to that formal bid. In this scenario, I think Liverpool fans, should the formal bid go in, can be quite encouraged by that, because I get the impression Liverpool will not be wasting their time now with a formal bid unless they think that there's a high chance of success. What number that's at, other than a British transfer record, I can't tell you at the moment. You can listen to the people on social media that tell you bid today, bid tomorrow. You can listen to people that tell you it's exactly this number. You can listen to people that tell you it's a done deal. You can go to bed with a smile on your face and think, great. And maybe playing the odds, their information will be correct. But my information is to take it step by step, be balanced, to report with accuracy. And like I say, at the moment, at the time we're live, could change today, tomorrow, next week, but at the time we're live, that is my understanding of the situation.
Yeah. And just one final question, because I know you've got to run off soon. From maybe not a more journalistic point, but maybe as yourself and kind of getting a feeling around the club, obviously it's already been a busy window for Liverpool. How many more signings do you think is realistic? And to add on to that, are you confident that you think Isaac it will happen, or is there still a potential chance it doesn't?
Yeah, like I say, my opinion on confidence is not relevant because my job is to present the facts as of now. And I don't think Liverpool are confident or not confident. I think Liverpool are waiting. And that's a key word, because waiting isn't inaction. Waiting is understanding when the right time in the market is to move to stand the chance of the most success. So sometimes when a bid goes in or doesn't go in, fans will often ask us as journalists, why are we not doing anything? Why has the bid not gone in? But if you just bid, you don't give yourself any time to play the game to get a deal done on your terms. So Liverpool's perspective on Isak is to steer well clear for now. Let Newcastle deal with the player, the politics, the replacements, the magnitude of the finances, because they've already had the conversation with Newcastle. So if they just went today, they'd be repeating themselves, and Newcastle might be repeating themselves because they don't have a replacement. So it's that waiting to see, is there a genuine window at genuine value, and will it end up suiting all parties? Because Isak doesn't want to stay. Financially, it's a great deal for Newcastle. When's the right time to come in and not just get rebuffed, not get an instant rejection, not get told it's 150 million plus? When's the right time to do this at a British transfer record? And obviously that time is going to be influenced by, do Newcastle get Shesko or Jackson or Watkins or Wissa? And maybe two of them have to come through the door. It's also going to be influenced by Yasser Al-Rumayyan and PIF determining what their actual valuation is, because this 150 number that's been bandied around has never been quoted to Newcastle. So I think that it's a book valuation, but Newcastle's recruitment team have not been empowered to go out there with that number to Liverpool. So the only number that's out there is the number that Liverpool gave to Newcastle, not a number that Newcastle gave to Liverpool. And that number was 120 million. So now people are saying 130, 135, some are saying 150, but these numbers are foreign to Liverpool Football Club, and they're even foreign to Newcastle United's negotiators, simply because it's just been not for sale. And if there is a 150 number, that's a book valuation. That's an internal valuation. It's not necessarily a situation where those may be doing the deal are in a scenario to comment on or to digest or to engage. So naturally, people come to us as journalists and they say, but tell us the latest, tell us something new, tell us what's developing. But if Liverpool are waiting, then we would be better informed as journalists to wait as well. And when it moves, report on why they're moving and if they are moving still as expected with confidence. So there may be a bit of limbo here, despite the fact people want daily updates. And I think it's very easy to go on social media and hear today, tomorrow, and the next day it's advancing, it's moving, it's agreed. Player wants to move. Player's put his house up for rent. Some of these things may have truth to them. Some of them may not. But the reality is that Liverpool know there will come a time in this window, likely when Newcastle finally get replacements through the door, when there is a right time to see whether this deal is genuinely feasible. And if they think there's even a glimmer of hope to do the deal, they'll be back with a formal bid. And if it's sooner rather than later, even better. If they don't, they actually put themselves in quite a good position, because they can always just deny it. They can say, we never moved because there was never a realistic chance, despite the clamour. We never moved because we got Hugo Ekitike. We'll move again in a year's time. So it's smart. If they just show their hand now and go, here's 135 million before you've got a replacement, with a month left of the window, when Newcastle still don't really want to sell in a perfect world, you may be showing too much of your hand and you may not get the deal done, or you may not get the deal done at value. So that can't be condensed into social media aggregation, and that can't be condensed into will they sign him or won't they sign him? And unfortunately, that can't be condensed into is it or isn't going to happen. But this is the reality. Someone can take a gamble and say it will happen. They might be right. Someone can take a gamble and say it might happen. They might look like an idiot. But reporting is around facts. And those are the facts as of today. So I think the waiting from Liverpool is smart because it allows them to put all the pressure and onus on Newcastle to deal with the player, to deal with replacements. And then if everything aligns, when Liverpool move in, the timing will allow them to bid with confidence. So I think the situation is this. If it gets to a formal bid, which I stress again is still anticipated by several sources, the bid will not be blind, it will be with confidence. And therefore, if they bid, I think there's a fair chance it gets done. If they don't bid, it won't be because they don't want to bid. It will be because they've read the market and they think Newcastle's position is genuine, that they can't do it at value, in which case they'll be back in January, they'll be back again next summer. This Isak situation is not going to end. There's a very realistic chance he becomes a Liverpool player. It's just a case of whether it's now or whether it's January or whether it's next summer. And that will all be informed by Liverpool waiting patiently to understand if there is a genuine opportunity to move.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm not going to keep you any longer, Ben. I massively appreciate you coming onto the channel. If you are new onto the channel, please do subscribe and obviously check out Ben as well on Twitter. Posts very informative and great content over there.